countdown to the last comic shop in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hey, it is now time for more of the Last Comic Shop Podcast!
Yes! Open tent. Everyone in.
Words, oldies, lights, moldies, stuff from the 90s and early 2000s.
Is it really we're that old that now that stuff is now old too? The 90s and early 2000s or ye olden days?
Dude, we have crossed a quarter of a century.
Well, isn't like the millennium technically starts in 2001, right? So like don't we have one more year to go before a quarter of a century?
Okay, year zero. Yeah, we're close enough, George. We're close enough.
We're not going to split hairs on this show. I don't have many to start splitting with anyways. I'm the host with the most, Andy Larson, and I often wear hats because of my lack of hair. But I am joined by somebody that has a wonderful coif of hair. That's Chad Smith. J.A. Scott, my other co-host, he's all right. He's still got some. And then, of course, the young kid on the block, George from Shortbox Summary, who, yes, he also has been blessed with a gorgeous mane. But long story short, we're not going to speak about hair for the rest of this episode, guaranteed. We are going to talk about Batman, though. Batman and Batgirl. That's the episode that we have lined up for you this week. And it is George's pick. Actually, this kind of harkens back to the fantasy draft that he was on earlier this year. Make sure you check that out in the archives, when he said that this Batgirl run from the early 2000s was his absolute favorite comic of all time.
Favorite DC book. I'm going to add that caveat just because there's some other books that mean quite a bit to me. But as far as DC goes, I think this is the best superhero book they put out, if not in that era, then of all time. Like this just cuts me in half every time I read it. We said we were going to read the first 11 issues. I read the entire run by the original creators on this. I read like issue 36, 37, 38, somewhere around there.
Peeling back the onion, when we decided what we were going to read, the initial suggestion was that we read the 36 issues. And we had to go back to George and say, George, that's a little bit too much for one read.
No, for the record, I said I think it would be too much to ask to read the entire original run by the original creators.
You did add that they read really fast, which is true. I mean, I tore through these 11 issues within like an hour, I think.
I didn't start until late in the week, and I'm like, I've got a lot to read. Boom, it went super fast. Yeah. Then I kind of wished, I was like, we should have read the rest. But I was like, come on.
I told you. Yeah.
But I did have a good question here, George. This isn't one of the first comic books series that you ever really got involved with, and then that's why it's so special to you.
I came to this book so much later. Like the first issue of the series I picked up, I didn't know was the second to last issue of the series. They were talking about it in Wizards, saying like, we think something big is going to happen. And I was like, oh shit, something big is going to happen. I should go check it out. And then the book ended the issue after the one I picked up. So I didn't actually come to this book until probably 2020. And my favorite era of all time is like the early 2000s, just because I love the aesthetic. I think everything is so positive. I think everything is so optimistic. And this book, I think, really captures that spirit in a way that I wasn't expecting a Batgirl book to. The idea of pushing into the future, this has all of that.
Well, one thing that we always like to do when George is on the show is get impressions of what other stuff happened around the same time.
Are they Italian impressions?
What are you, Chico Marx here? Come on. No, we want to make sure that we're doing kind of the other things that were going on within the pop culture zeitgeist at the same time that this Batgirl series was on. So when we have George on, he likes to give us the movies and the music and the other comic books that were released around the same time as the issues we're going to be reading. So let's get into our time machine and go back to when, George?
We are going back to February 2000. That is when this book was published. Key events for February 2000. February 4th, The Sims video game comes out. The Sims 1.
Yeah.
Right.
They used to put people in there, and then their microwave would catch on fire, and they were so sad.
Yeah, so you played the game like everyone else did. You're good.
I tried.
February 10th, Jim Varney dies of lung cancer.
Now that's sad.
Yeah.
February 12th, Charles Schultz dies. And then
That's
February,
true. Yeah,
February
you're
13th
right.
is the last Peanuts comic strip.
Right.
Yeah, we did talk about that during our Peanut show. How, like, it outlasted him. It outlasted
Yeah, because
him.
they'd have been put in the mail.
And then this feels like it would be appropriate for Andy. February 29th, Steely Dan releases its first album together in 20 years.
Yeah. Well, they peaked with Dirty Work, and then I don't know. After that,
There was a yacht rock show on HBO, a documentary, and they basically said that all of those yacht rock bands, they just stole from one Steely Dan song. It was the whole, like,
are you reeling in me? Throwing away the tide. In any case, let's move on to music. Now, you said that you had like some choices for us.
I've got options for it. I have the Billboard Hot 100, which covers pop. I've got Tunecaster, which covers like the rock top 30, and then I've got Playback FM's chart for rock and roll from this month. I wasn't sure which genre you'd be more interested in. Like,
is there a Napster or a LimeWire chart?
I wish. I honestly, if I could find that information, that would be my go-to. Like the most downloaded song on that would be incredible.
Are we going to go with the most adult-oriented rock that we can get to?
All right. In that case, because there's only one Three Doors Down song on it, I'm going to go with the Tunecaster from Weekly Rock Top 30. These are the top 10 songs. Number 10, Stand Inside Your Love by Smashing Pumpkins.
Oh.
Number 9, Only God Knows Why, Kid Rock.
Bada bang bang diggy diggy.
Probably the same album, I think. Yeah. He only had one album, surely, right? Yeah. Number 8, Never Let You Go, Third Eye Blind. One of my favorite bands of all time. I've seen them live 4 times. Number 7, Voodoo by Godsmack. Number 6, Kryptonite, Three Doors Down.
That was a banger. I listened to that quite a lot.
Yeah, it still pops. Like, that one still gets a lot of play at my local karaoke bar, so big fan. Mm-hmm. Number 5, Letting the Cables Sleep by Bush.
Oh, that is the first true banger on this. No, that is one of the best songs from that particular era. Man, that is like a sleeper. Like, nobody listens. Get me where I live, Letting the Cables Sleep.
I remember Bush. I remember Machine Head.
And Glycerine, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
This was off of their third Science of Things. I think their third album. Yeah.
I can't say I'm a big Bush head, so that's gonna fall on you. But number 4, Other Side by Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Listen to that.
Number 3, Miserable by Lit.
Oh yes, that was one of Ethan's faves. He had that on his Winamp playlist.
Winamp. It really whips the llama's ass.
Number 2,
Really?
Ex-Girlfriend by No Doubt. And number 1, Pardon Me by Incubus.
Oh, that's a good one. I dated a girl that loved that song. Do you like any other Incubus songs? No, just that one. Okay.
Incubus was underrated. They were overrated for a long time, and now everyone's overcorrected, and they are now, in fact, underrated. Movies, number 10, The Cider House Rules.
What was the line at the end whenever they go to bed? Good night, you princes of Maine, you kings of New England.
But now I do want to hear Chad's Michael Caine on Interstellar.
I didn't watch Interstellar.
Not?
It's so f***ing good.
Yeah. Chad jumped off
like-
after Inception. He got so pissed at Inception that he just said, "No more Christopher Nolan."
You're missing
ever."
but his best movies were not those.
They actually filmed part of that in my hometown. Like that scene on the beach that is that takes place close to me. I'm not going to say where. I just realized I doxed myself. Number 9, The Green Mile.
Nice. Not my favorite Tom Hanks movie, but probably in the top 5.
I miss Michael Clark Duncan.
That's a Stephen King story, right? So where does that rank in Stephen King movies?
I mean,
Somewhere far behind Carrie, far behind The Shining, far behind
Shawshank.
Yeah, far behind Misery. He
I'd
didn't
say
get out of the cock-a-doodie car.
top 10 just because those It movies are pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Number 8 at the box office was The Hurricane. Michael Mann directing Will Smith.
Yeah, I saw it because I'm a huge Bob Dylan fan. So
Number 7, Pitch Black.
That Vin Diesel.
Sure is. Sure
Started
is.
Vin Diesel.
Yeah.
I remember back in the day when like Chronicles of Riddick came out, and everyone was like, "Wait a minute, you didn't see Pitch Black? Who are you?" It's like, I'm sorry. Was I supposed to? Well, you don't know all about him then. I was just like,
You didn't need to know a lot.
That's
You
right.
can get caught up in about a minute.
sorry with your Chronicles of Riddick snobs.
Number 6 was Hanging Up. Drama movie with like Diane Keaton, Meg Ryan, Lisa Kudrow. It's like 3 daughters of like a curmudgeonly father who like the dad's like about to die, and like it's just them like reevaluating their relationship with him. It's kind of like King Lear but shitty.
I can picture the poster with the telephone.
Number 5, I genuinely love this movie, The Whole Nine Yards, with Matthew Perry and Bruce Willis.
Amanda Peet.
Amanda Peet, most importantly, yeah. Number 4, The Tigger Movie.
Didn't see that coming.
Didn't either.
No.
Number 3, I genuinely love this movie too, The Beach, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, directed by Danny Boyle.
Apparently, because of Leo got picked for that movie, Ewan McGregor and Danny Boyle didn't speak for like 20 years.
Oh, really?
Because Ewan was angry that he didn't get a look for The Beach because he had made 3 previous movies with Danny Boyle. I mean, that's also why it took so long to get Trainspotting 2 done then.
Wow. Okay. That's so petty. I love it. Number 2. This movie actually meant a lot to me as a kid, especially on like HBO rotations. Snow Day, which was like a Nickelodeon movie about kids who basically got like a free day because it snowed. Chris Elliott was like the shitty old snowplow guy who they hated because like he ruined all their fun. It was great to a 10-year-old George. That movie was fantastic.
You can't go over Chris Elliott.
Great as a weird, angry, ornery snowplow man. And the number 1 at the box office for February 2000, Scream 3.
Now that's beyond my screams. So once they got rid of the Matthew Lillards,
Those were easy date movies. Come on. Like Scream, Scream 2, Scream 3. You're like, meh. You're going to get a hug. Somebody's going to jump scare. It's fine.
Someone's going to grab your hand. Yeah.
They were easy smooching movies. So I saw Scream 3 at least.
I actually think Scream 2 is like legitimately good. Scream 3, diminishing returns on very similar ideas to Scream 2. Scream 4, I think, sucked. I remember seeing that one in college. But no, Scream 3, overrated but overhated.
Okay. Do you have anything else for us, George, before we go to commercial break?
I have the 11 best-selling comic books of February 2000. Number 1, Jay, I'm probably going to need your help for this one. Uncanny X-Men 379, 108,000 copies. Number 2, X-Men 99, 104,000 copies.
That's way past Onslaught.
I think that's around Legacy Virus time, right?
It's from the ashes. Yeah.
Right. So New X-Men starts around 113. So you're about a year away from them just giving everything to Grant Morrison.
We're close. We're so close. Number 3, Wolverine 149. Number 4, Aria Angela, Heavenly Creatures, a book I am not familiar with and forgot to look up.
I bought it back in the day. You can just skip it. Move on.
Number 5, Avengers 27, 75,000 copies. That is the Kurt Busiek, George Perez, Avengers Volume 3, The Hero's Return. Number 6 with 75,000 copies, JLA 40. This is the second to last Grant Morrison, Howard Porter issue. Number 7, Punisher 1. 71,000 copies. That is like the Marvel Knights Punisher.
Okay, the Garth Ennis.
Garth Ennis, Steve Dillon stuff.
Yeah.
Number 8, Spawn 95 with 68,000 copies. Numbers 9 and 10 were Daredevils 11 and 12. Both sold 66,000. It was a reissue of a book. I assume there was like some damage or there was like a printing error, but that is like the end of the Kevin Smith run with Joe Quesada.
Yeah, the Kevin Smith run, I want to say wrapped up around issue 8.
I might be thinking of Green Arrow. I might be confusing this. And then number 11 is our Girl of the Hour. It is Batgirl with 64,000 issues. Yeah.
So this came out to quite fanfare. 11th top selling issue in that month. All right.
And I got some more books just to paint the bigger context. Earth X issue 12 just came out. Batman Dark Victory 5, Batman Gotham Knights issue 2, X-Men The Hidden Years was still going on, a book I actually remember reading from that time period, Flash 159, which is close to the end of the Mark Waid and almost the Jeff Johns era, Authority issue 12, the last Warren Ellis and Brian Hitch issue on that, Superman vs. the Terminator Death to the Future issue 3, back when DC was doing those license crossovers, Starman 64, we were still getting our monthly fix of James Robinson talking about Jack Knight, and then the first run of Birds of Prey just hit issue 16 this same month also. So some pretty big books were happening in February 2000.
See, I was going to say that there were more books in the ones that you didn't list in the top 10 that I actually had. Earth X and
to be fair, if you weren't collecting any of the X-Men books, that's like 4 or 5 of the top 10 are X-related books.
It was the first 3 books. Yeah, we're all X books.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have for this particular segment. We got to get to comic book talk, so stay tuned for more Last Comic Shop. Right after these commercial breaks, we'll be back with George's absolute favorite DC comic of all time. It is Batgirl, the first 11 issues. Stay tuned.
Looking to save money on your collectible supplies? Whether it's comics, cards, sports memorabilia, or miscellaneous pop culture bric-a-brac, make sure to use promo code LCSPOD to get 10% off your orders at bcwsupplies.com. Not only does it get you a discount on BCW's already low prices, but using LCSPOD at checkout is an amazing way to show support to the Last Comic Shop podcast, the most incredible comic book podcast on the airwaves. So if you're in need of collectible supplies, head out to bcwsupplies.com and use promo code LCSPOD today. That's promo code LCSPOD. Cheers!
In a world where there's often 60 plus years of history to worry about, how can you quickly get into a new comic character or franchise? If you're like me, then you turn to video games. But how well does that work out? In some cases, pretty well. In others, it's a giant disaster. But how can you know which games will set you on the right path and which games will just leave you more confused than you were before? Play Comics is the show for you. I'm Chris, and each episode we take a look at video games based on comic properties and how well they stick to that source material. So listen in and get the scoop on which games are worth your time over at playcomics.com or wherever you find your favorite podcasts.
All right, we are back and we're talking about Batgirl, and a very specific Batgirl, one who doesn't talk a lot. So we're going to have to talk for her.
We're just going to mansplain our way all the way through this whole thing.
It's true. But this is one of your favorites, J.A. This is Little Bat, right?
It is The Little Bats. I'm so glad George picked this book that came out in 2000, and we'd read the first 11, though some of us carried on and read 30, 35, 40 issues. Chad, tell us who did these issues.
Okay, so as far as creatives go, for the first half of the book, you had Scott Peterson and Kelly Puckett serving as plotters, and then eventually around issue 6 or 7, Kelly Puckett just takes over. He does the writing duties throughout, and then we have Damian Scott on pencils, Robert Campanella on inks, John Costanza on letters, Jason Wright on colors, and Denny O'Neil is the editor, steering the ship throughout the Batgirl series here.
Okay. George, what happened in these 11 issues? Give us a 10-cent.
Oh, man. In this book, we are introduced really for the first time to Cassandra Cain in her new mantle as Batgirl. She appears every bit as equal as Batman in terms of fighting prowess, maybe the best single combat fighter in the world. And it's really nature versus nurture, what you were born into versus what you choose to be. But in the issues that we read, for all intents and purposes, it is her learning about her father, David Cain, who is like the world's greatest assassin. And it's her slowly learning how to speak, her changing her character. And I don't really know how else to describe it, to be honest. All these books are just like one and done stories that seem almost not connected until the end of the run when they're all extremely connected, which is why we should have read the entire run. But that's beside the point. In this run in particular, the most important thing is that Cassandra Cain is a new member of the Bat family who has the ability to read her opponent's body language, and she uses that to her advantage to become the best fighter in the world. And she meets someone who unscrambles her brain and gives her the ability to speak, and that comes into conflict with her great ability of reading her opponent's moves.
And that was one of my first questions. The descrambler, does that guy ever show up again?
No, I don't.
Very much.
I don't think he does. I think it was just
Deus Ex Machina.
Very much so, yeah.
And so I do want to say, J.A., that I think it makes sense. Again, they have this Deus Ex Machina because that's where Kelly Puckett really becomes the main scripter of the story, is around the same time as they introduce this descrambler, and then Batgirl actually becomes a character. Like you hear all of her inner dialogue and her inner monologue, and she's having struggles. She's no longer the greatest thing ever, but she's got to real teach herself how to be, this elite fighter. And so she actually has struggles. And you start going through like the traditional superhero origin story, like the first 10 issues of Amazing Spider-Man, where you don't know what the heck you're doing, but you just got to learn. And so for me, that's about the time when I really started to like the series. I didn't really like the first couple.
That was interesting, because that's when I was like, oh man, they just turned her into any other character now. But then she's got Batman trying to teach her, and he's doing a horrible job. She's just getting beat up, and then she runs into Lady Shiva. Does she know that Shiva's her mom at that point, or is that not yet a thing? Not
a thing yet.
Okay. And then off panel, Lady Shiva just gives back all her powers again, but for like a year, and then she's going to kill her. Does that obviously that doesn't happen because Cassandra Cain's still around, so she didn't get killed by Lady Shiva.
I don't know. If we had read the entire run like someone recommended, we would know what happened.
I want to go back to my point about the guy with the language, right? Because I'm going to go back to this, right? Because that was really a turning point for me in this particular series. Because I think the issue right before that, Cassie Cain goes up against a metahuman for the first time, right? Batman's like, oh my God, it's a metahuman. She's going to get her ass kicked. And she just like handles him like he was yesterday's garbage. And I'm just like, dude, no, somebody right out of the gate should not be that powerful. You could off-balance that by giving them some sort of like weird like disadvantage they had. And so this disadvantage was she can't talk. She can't communicate, which is a disadvantage for us as readers because we just don't get to interact with her, but it's not a disadvantage for her as a character. But once she gets this language and she misses the ability to now read everything and be the greatest thing and even be better than Batman, which, god damn it, I hate when Batman's the best at everything. Like, don't give me somebody that's even better than Batman. That's just going to piss me off. So when she actually had to work to be a superhero, when she had to work to do this, when she was getting her ass kicked, it was a much more relatable, and it was a better hero. Those self-sacrifices, the taking bullets, getting the shit kicked out of her by Shiva, that was awesome. And that's why, like, those first couple issues were just like, this is, I was really almost about to put the book down.
And then when she was Spider-Man for 4 issues, it was great.
That's right.
And say what you will, that disadvantage again is a disadvantage for us as readers, not for her as a character in this universe. I
don't know what you're talking about. The whole thing that she reads people's movements and that's her language, that was so cool. That was so original. Yeah, I get why they did that Deus Ex Machina thing, because it's a comic book and you need to have some of that dialogue. You have to kind of understand, she has to speak. You can't have a totally mute character. There's also a reason why they gave her back that power set, because it's so original and interesting and sets her apart and makes her different and makes her character. And then you can start to play on the whole, as George was saying, the two fathers and nature versus nurture and what is going to be her future. Is it going to revert and become this thing that she was raised to do? Or is she going to grow up and become a Batman?
All right, so it seems like we are on opposite sides of this in terms of George's book. We're going to keep George out of this for a second because, again, Chad can be the decider among us three as to which one's right, Chad.
This is really tough because you're both wrong and you're both right the entire time. Okay? Now hear me out. So we started this book and I had a lot of feelings. First, I thought it was super cool, the setup for Batgirl, where there's this girl, she doesn't have language. Her language is violence. Her language is body language and reading and reacting, and she's a better fighter than Batman. And that's awesome. But then the art is terrible. It's Dollar General Joe Quesada art.
Oh my God.
I know. Believe me, I felt the same way. So Damian Scott, the artist, he's a guy I know from my DC solo book, which I recommended, I want to say last year. And he's like a hip hop guy, and the stuff he was doing like graffiti styles. And I remember him from Bill Willingham whenever Stephanie became Robin. This was a dude that was his own dude when I saw him. And I'm imagining when George came onto this book later on, he saw the Damian Scott that was his own dude. But the first couple issues here, he's just putting on a puppet show pretending he's Joe Q. And I'd rather just have real Joe Q. And then in issue 3, they bring in this guy who's like, yeah, I'm going to give her language so they could write stories and stuff. And I'm like, oh, man, that's dumb. Now she's just like everybody else. But then, because they gave her language, now that mucked everything up, and all of a sudden the story got really interesting. And so I kept going back and forth and be like, this isn't that great. Like, oh, this is awesome. This is not. It's both at the same time simultaneously. Is it a total cop-out that off panel, she goes to Shiva and be like, yeah, fix me. And Shiva's like, all right. And then it happens. But it's still awesome. Like, I enjoyed the heck out of it. Like, the 2000s is kind of a blind spot for me. I think I was reading Daredevil and a handful of other books, and that's about it. And so this is not my Bat universe. I have like over 150 issue run that caps right before Cataclysm because I just got tired of all the Bat universe stuff, and I didn't pick up until later on. So like all of this stuff was new and exciting and unfamiliar, but yeah, I kept going back and forth. But it honestly felt to me like a Marvel series more so than a DC series, because you would have these ridiculous things happen. All of a sudden, Spider-Man has 6 arms. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. But it's awesome because he's fighting vampires. And there are consequences and things like that. And that's what this book felt like. They would do something, and I'd be like, what do you do? Oh, wait, no. And then they do something else like, oh, that's the, no, but it's, oh. But I really enjoyed it by the time it's all said and done. So is there bad stuff in here? Yeah, there is. There's cool stuff in here, too, and it all balances out in the end. And then towards the end, we get real Damian Scott. Like, he starts developing his own style, and I can see where this could grow and become a good thing.
Well, George, you've been silent. You've heard the three of us. Long story short, what did you think, sir? Come on. Why should we love this?
I think this is probably one of the best examples of comic bookery. Like, this is a comic book-ass comic. Chad, I understand your gripes with the art. I get why you would say that they look like unrefined, but there's like a momentum and a kineticism in it where it's just like, it looks like a cartoon that's like just moving in slow motion. This feels like they're trying to tell a story, not that they're trying to market a product. Like, there's something so indie about this book where it is rough around the edges, and the fact that it is a character who for the first 5 issues didn't have like an inner monologue box, which was like honestly kind of a really annoying staple of books at the time. And kind of, we're about to get into mega inner monologue with like the Brian Michael Bendis era. It felt like they let kids take the car keys, right, and just like they were going for a joyride. And so I think it's that this entire book is about choosing to be what you want to be as opposed to what you were supposed to be. And so you have the two fathers of Cain and Batman, and it's just like Batgirl, like, what makes her a hero when she was raised to be this monster? It's like, well, it's because she chose to be a hero. It's because she wanted to do this, because her first instinct is to take the bullets. And that concept is just, it's always shown and never told in this book. And I just think that's frankly incredible.
I love that scene where she gets so angry at the one bad guy because he gets in position right behind her so that if she dodges the bullet, he's going to get shot.
Yeah.
And she's like, you idiot! What are you doing? And then she has to run at the other guy and get shot to knock him down. And the whole, I'm not going to kill, this is what I've learned from my new father. And she says that to her old father. Oh, that was great. You're right.
But meanwhile, judgy-ass Batman's like, I saw this tape of you from when you were 6 and you killed a guy. We're going to have to talk.
Well, maybe you should keep reading, Chad. I don't know. It might come up again, Chad.
The thing I'd like to add, too, and this goes back to, it's in the first issue. She's trying to connect with people, and it's that journey of connecting with other people. We haven't even mentioned the elder Batgirl, Barbara Gordon, who's here, and she's trying to be the good human and balances Batgirl as a person and admit that she has cellulite
yes.
in one of the scenes. But no, you have that relationship where Barbara Gordon is trying to fix the mistakes that she made, maybe.
Sure.
She's trying to say, hey, Batman is looking out for you. Don't go out until he tells you to go out. But, she's also arguing with Bruce about things. And I don't know. I think that's a really impactful journey. And George, for as much smack as I've talked about this book, I genuinely mean it. This feels like a Marvel book where you would have all these ridiculous things, but there would be consequences and there would be soap opera and things would keep moving forward. It's not just and then it's this happens, and because of this, now this is the case. I think they do a really good job storytelling throughout this book. At the same time, it does feel they gave the kids the keys and said, here, you go have fun with this and build off in this corner of the universe. This would be a 6-issue miniseries today. And it got how many issues? 72, you said?
73.
That's what's astounding to me.
1,000%. Yeah. Like we talked about like Batman and Cain being like the two fathers. We didn't talk about like Oracle and Shiva being like the two mothers to her, right? Like she's constantly being pulled and pushed between like these two different lifestyles because she wants what Shiva has that she lost, but she wants to use it to be like Batman. Shiva's constantly like goading her, being like, you can't beat me if you're not willing to go the extra level. But like it gets to a point where like Batman and Oracle are like, yeah, it's coming up. Her fight with Shiva, she still hasn't told us anything about this. Like, is she ever going to do it? Like, so like there's more tension. No, where like she made a deal with the devil where like she got her powers back, but she's going to die in 1 year. Would I rather have a lifetime of mediocre or 1 year of perfect? And she chooses 1 year of perfect because that's how she can help the most people. That's how she can be the best person. And God damn, I just think that's beautiful. I think that is, and she is just like the embodiment of that idea of just pushing yourself to the edge. Eventually she meets Spoiler and starts hanging out with her. She meets Tim Drake, who is like the Robin at this time. And it's just like, everyone's just like in awe of her because like they know what she is. They know what she's capable of. And the fact that Oracle and Batman knew what she did to get her powers back, to be the best again, God, it's just so good, man. Like, this is, yeah, the more I talk about it, this might be my favorite comic book. Again, because of the show versus the telling. Even when she gets her language back, like the narrative boxes, they're not overbearing. Like, it is literally stream of consciousness. I don't think a single box is more than like 8 words at a time ever. Like, it is just her piecing together the bare minimum that she has to succeed in a situation or to spectacularly fail and learn in a situation. God, this book is so special. This book's great. Thank you so much for doing this, guys. I really appreciate it. Anytime I get to gush about this, hot damn.
All right. Well, let's get to commercial break. We got ratings coming up in just a few seconds. So stay tuned for more of The Last Comic Shop right after this.
Hi, this is Pat Morta. Looking for a special opportunity to read to your child? You'll find it at your library this April 30th, when libraries bring books and families together for National El Día de los Niños, El Día de los Libros, Children's Day Book Day. To learn more, please contact your local library or visit ala.org/DIA.
We're all familiar with the Golden Age, Silver Age, Bronze Age, and Modern Age of comics, but we can't still be in the Modern Age after almost 4 decades, can we?
We don't think so. And that's why we started the Iron Age of Comics, a critical re-evaluation of comic books from about 1985 to 2000.
On this podcast, we go beyond the chromium covers and the grim and gritty cliches, and take a deep dive into one of the most vibrant but divisive periods in comics history.
That's the Iron Age of Comics, with new episodes every first and third Wednesdays of the month. And look for us on social media, where the handle is @Iron Age of Comics.
All right, we're back with more of The Last Comic Shop, and it is now time for ratings, where you don't have to be the greatest fighter in the world to get a rating. You just need to be somebody that we think is special enough. So thank you for being special to us, and we hope that we are special to you in return. J.A. Scott's always special to us, and he gets us our 1 out of 4 scale. What is it this week?
In honor of all things Cassandra Cain, we're going to go 1 out of 4 little bats.
Oh, it's cute. That's a cute sound effect. I like it.
Hell yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and start off with the guy that recommended this book on this show, because I think this is going to be a fairly straightforward rating. But, George, final thoughts on Batgirl with your rating.
I'm going to give it a 4 out of 4. Like, this is what I want out of comics. And again, it's the way they show and don't tell. There's one like 3-page sequence, and I want to say Batgirl issue 15. That is like my favorite sequence, maybe like in any comic book, where this guy has been mind wiped by some doctor guy basically, and to reliving his worst fear. So he's like a veteran, so he's actually just like attacking a city block, and he throws a grenade, and Cassie catches the grenade, attaches it to like her bat grappler thing, shoots it up into the air, and then goes off and starts fighting. And this is all happening over a 2-page spread. she lands like the final blow on him as like the grenade is going off in the sky. And the fact that like the action is so clear while such like a complex fight scene is happening, where there's no dialogue, there's no narrative happening, there's none of that bullshit. It's literally just action that is happening and trusts you to understand and keep up with it. This book is the ideal of showing and not telling. And even when she gets the ability to speak, I think she does such a good job of speaking fragmentally that it's still like unclear what she's really saying. Like it's just all this shit that just coalesces perfectly throughout a book. 4 out of 4. I'm gonna stop talking now.
That's all right. We love passion on the Last Comic Shop. J.A., what's your rating?
So initially I was thinking this is about a 3.5, 3.75. I didn't have so much of a problem with the art, Chad, though it did take me a while, like an issue or two, to get into it, to get, because it is very cartoony. It is very Joe Quesada-esque, exaggerated, and you have to get used to that. But I thought once you got used to it, I really liked it, especially before she started talking, because it was doing so much of the heavy lifting. Because she wears a costume that covers her entire face and her eyes. There's nothing. So you really got to do, as an artist, exaggerated poses within that mask to sort of capture emotion, and especially when she's not saying anything. And I just loved that. I loved, as I said, the fact that her language was reading human movement. And I did think it was a little bit of a cop-out, though I understand why they did it thematically, to have this Deus Ex Machina metahuman re-scramble her mind. I'm glad she got her powers back, because those couple of issues where she was trying to learn was just so boring to me. It was just like, ugh, this is just like sort of every other comic. And then they dropped it. And I was like, yes, it's not just like another 20 issues of, overcoming and anyone can be a superhero. Sometimes you want superheroes that are just badass, right? That they're much better than you, and you could never be like them. Because of all that, but more importantly, because this book is so important to George, and to see what it did to him as a fan, I have to give it a 4. That impact on somebody else, and for it to do that much for him, takes it over the top that little bit. So it's a 4.
Well, unlike J.A., I am not swayed by such sentimentality as this is somebody's favorite book, and therefore I have to give it some sort of rating that's not, I don't know, one that I can get behind. And I will say this. It was a slog to get through the first 3 issues of this book. I didn't know why George liked this book so much. In fact, as a comic book fan, I actually went back and said, did I miss something? Did I miss something with Cassandra Cain that I just don't understand in these first 3 issues? And so I went back and actually read No Man's Land and her first appearances in that to see if I missed something. And I really didn't. It filled in a little bit of the gaps. But really what happened was I just kept on reading because I was given an assignment. And so I read those issues, and then all of a sudden this jabroni shows up and gives us the ability to talk. And for some reason, that just seemed to turn things around for me. Whether or not J.A. agrees with me, whether or not anybody agrees with me, I just thought that it made the character less, perfect, less, invincible, like just somebody that I could root for. And after that, the pages started turning, and I very quickly finished issues, I think 4 to 11, again, within like a half an hour, because they were very quick reads. So I definitely appreciate that. I don't know about the art. I didn't mind the art. The art seemed to fit the story. So I don't have that gripe with Chad. I really got the gripe with, I just didn't understand what the heck Batgirl was for the first couple issues. And I just didn't like her as a character. And as a result of some of those issues being there and my initial trepidation about this whole series, I can't give it anything more than maybe 2.95. So it's almost a 3. It's almost good. Much better than average. But am I going back? Am I reading more Cassie Cain? Probably not. Sorry, George. I'm a curmudgeon.
Quite the heel turn, Andy. Wow.
Chad, finish this off here.
Geez, it made me think of other books I've read that, were fun and quirky and had a different perspective on things, and, different art style that wasn't in the mainstream, and, found itself as it went. And boy, did I remember Squirrel Girl, George. Remember Squirrel Girl?
Oh wait, is this Squirrel Girl's Revenge? Is me not liking that book? You're just gonna dock it here?
No, honestly, the Damian Scott art in the beginning, you should really check out classic Joe Quesada art. If you like that, you'll really love Joey Q. And that was in contrast to a character that I thought was super original. Like I said, I've been of two minds with this book the entire time, because sometimes stuff would happen and it would just be so unbelievable, like, oh, they're just doing that because they want to do this. But then they would take it and they would run with it, and it was really fun. Because I don't have the sense of nostalgia with this book, I'm not going to rate it as high as you and JA, although I do appreciate it.
Like, I love the era that this came from. That is what I'm nostalgic for, but I didn't read this book until 4 years ago.
Okay.
I just think it's like the best example of the medium.
You relate to it, but it's in your
right.
I don't think this is a bad book. I also don't think it changed the medium or whatever. I just think it was a solid comic book. It has its flaws, but it also has a lot going for it. I think Cassie Cain is a super interesting character. I like her moveset. I do think, putting her into the Batman universe and having her interact with all those other Bat characters, like, that's fun. There's something about that mix with the Bat family. That's comic book magic there. So at the end of the day, I'm going to go slightly higher than Andy, but I feel like I respect the book more. I'm going to say it's a solid 3. It's a solid comic book. If I were reading this month by month, I would keep reading it. It's just like Moon Knight, where it would stay on my pull list until I got to the point where I had to trim things down. I go, well, I guess maybe Batgirl. It seemed like it flowed really well. It was really fun. And for all the ridiculous stuff, they would answer that with some solid storytelling as a result. My only thing now is, I'll talk about Tim Drake later. I feel like Cassie Cain is similar to Tim Drake, where like DC has all these characters and they don't know what to do with them. What's your take on Cassie Cain in the modern DC universe?
I've got some recommendations.
Okay.
Well, since George has some recommendations, let's go ahead and get to that part of the show, right? Let's not tease that and not deliver. It's time for recommendations, where we hope that you pick up not only Batgirl in a variety of different formats. Do they have collections? I mean, you said about the Silent Night, and I've seen that before, and I'm sure you can pick up the single issues still. Are there any other collections that these issues are in?
These are available as floppies, like you said. 3 oversized, like 12-issue, 13-issue trade paperbacks with the original run that goes up through issue 37. That's my first recommendation, is honestly just finish this run by these creators. It feels very special, especially like 37 issues is like nothing to sneeze at, especially now, right? Like, not a lot of creators get that much time to cook on a book, so that is something special. I kind of recommend 38 to 73 for this run. Like, that's more about Cassie than it is about the creators. I think the first 37 issues like really have some special sauce. If you want more Cassie in your life, I'm going to recommend the current Birds of Prey by Kelly Thompson, and the most recent issues I have are by Sami Basri. I think you guys did an episode on Birds of Prey, right?
We did the first 5.
Super fun book, probably my favorite team book at the moment, either that or Fantastic Four from Marvel. Chad, are you back on my side now that I said
no,
that?
my review for that book was also, pretty good. Whatever. Take it or leave it.
All right.
Sorry.
It's okay.
And then Kelly Thompson blasted him on Twitter for saying bad things.
Saying bad things about the artist.
I said he was the villain guy on Hawkeye, which he was.
Okay. Another recommendation I've got is the James Tynion IV run of Detective Comics. I'm not naming the artist just because there were a bunch, but it happens in DC Rebirth, like Detective Comics issues 934 to 981. And the only reason I'm recommending this is because it feels pretty clear that like Cassie is one of James Tynion's favorite characters. So I recommend you read it for that. And also Tim Drake is clearly like one of his favorite characters, and like I think they've got good chemistry in this book, and especially in that book. And then there's actually a new Batgirl series that just hit issue 5, and that's by Tate Bromble and Takeshi Miyazawa, who I love from Spider-Man Loves Mary Jane, which is another book. I'm putting out feelers now for that book to be the next book I come on to talk about, is Spider-Man Loves Mary Jane, and like Mary Jane Homecoming and all those. That one we will have to read a bunch of issues. Like, that is going to be like a summer fest. I'm going to make that my birthday present request for this summer. Whatever, it's fine. Thematically, if you're looking for books that feel like this, I recommend Chase by D.C. Johnson and J.H. Williams III. I know that is one of Mikey Wood's favorite books. I don't want to put words into that beautiful man's beautiful mouth, but I know he's fond of that book. And then Global Frequency. And I'm picking those two books, Global Frequency by Warren Ellis and various artists. those were like turn of the century type books where it does have like the high kinetic, high momentum energy where each issue is essentially a one and done. And it just moves on to the next beat, moves on to the next beat, moves on to the next beat. These books kind of capture the same energy that I feel influenced like the Bourne Identity, like how there was like all of a sudden like a new genre of spy movie that just like felt different to like, this isn't your dad's spy movie, this isn't James Bond, this isn't Roger Moore doing weird shit with like a Union Jack parachute as he escapes a bunch of assassins on ski. Like this just felt different. So I gave you some Cassie recommendations, I gave you some aesthetic recommendations. I hope you enjoy.
Yeah, that's quite a lot, actually.
I feel like a dick for giving somebody. I promise to never do that again. It's just that this is my favorite DC book of all time, so I'm trying to give. Trying to give it out.
He's going to shoot a shot, folks. Right here, you saw it. All right, well, I'm going to go next with my recommendation, and I only have one. This week, it's going to be another one of those kind of coming of age stories with a young girl that's got superpowers that learns that she's got superpowers for the first time, but it's kind of got a macabre and horror bent to it, and it's called Harrow County. And it's done by the wonderful Colin Bunn with art by Tyler Crook. And this just oozes just eerie, creepy goodness. There's a witch in this small county in the 1930s or whatever, a long time ago. Her name's Hester Beck. They hang Hester Beck. And she says, I'm going to come back for you. And then sometime later, this girl named Emmy is coming of age and seems to have all the same powers as Hester Beck did. Not only that, but all the townspeople are in fear of these powers. Will she use them for good? Will she use them for evil? And then a twin shows up? Oh my goodness. But it's just great. The reason why I love this book so much is because I'm like a farm boy, and so I grew up in the woods and things like that, and there was always what was creepy and hiding behind trees or hanging out in the local pond and the monsters and goblins and ghosts in the woods, and it has an atmosphere, this Harrow County book, which it can't be denied. And so I feel like if you want some of that kind of backwoods folklore, oh brother, where art thou kind of setting, I think Harrow County really does encapsulate that. And it's a great story from beginning to end. So check it out. J.A.?
I am recommending an ongoing series. Probably find the back issue still easily accessible at your local comic book shop. It's Magic by Ashley Allen and Herman Peralta with colors by Arthur Hesley. This is Magic, the former X-Men, current X-Men Marvel character, Ilyana Rasputina. They put the A in this one because that's how you're supposed to spell female names in Russia, not Rasputin as they thought, but whatever. It's just a fun ongoing new series. We haven't had an ongoing series for Magic ever. So that's good. She's a complicated character, and they finally get to dig into not just her mutant powers and the whole thing with Limbo, but also the sorcery side of everything, which a lot of the time in the X books, especially during the Krakoan Age, she just became a bus for people. She was just transporting people here and there, and then she'd show up and cut somebody's head off with her sword or cut their head off with her stepping discs, which was pretty badass, to be honest. But now she's fighting the occult, and there's all this black magic involved. So it's really getting to explore that other side of her character that I think personally don't see enough of. So I was motivated to pick this just based on George's overall gushing love of Cassandra Cain and that book. And, as you know, if you've listened to this show at all, I have a similar gushing love for all things magic. So to have an ongoing series with her as a character is just fantastic.
All right. Well, Chad, finish us out here.
Okay, I'm going back to the Bat Fam, and I'm going to go way back to 1989. There was a 5-part story called The Lonely Place of Dying. And it was written by Marv Wolfman with art by Jim Aparo and George Perez. It ran through the Batman books and the New Teen Titans book. I think it was just New Titans at the time. But basically, two faces out there, and there's this young kid who has decided that Batman needs a Robin. He's been following Batman, his whole life, and he could see that after the death of Jason Todd, that Batman is getting a little bit more or less hinged, I guess is the way to put it. And so he goes to Dick Grayson and pleads like, hey, you've got to be Robin again. Dick Grayson turns him down. He's like, no, I'm my own man. And so this kid takes it upon himself to become Robin. It's the origin story for Tim Drake and puts him in a detective class with Bruce Wayne. And then he would train for a while before he gets his own Neil Adams designed costume and goes out on his own to become Robin. But for me at the time, it was the first expansion of the Bat family, and it was something that just felt right. And then similar to Cassie Cain, where that was another extension of the Bat family, you had another Batgirl. And I was alluding to with George, eventually both characters were displaced because Bruce got another Robin that was his biological son. And so, thanks for Tim Drake. And then the editorial decided, you know what, Oracle is great and all, but really want the classic Batgirl back again. So then Barbara Gordon back as Batgirl. And so that sends characters like Cassie Cain off askew. But they're still out there and they're still floating around in the Bat family. They're still a part of stories and they matter. And for the folks that were there at the beginning and for the folks that have followed their stories, they really do matter as much as, I don't know. I always go back and forth with DC Comics. Like, it seems like there's only a handful of characters they care about, but then they'll leave these guys on the fringe.
How long was Barbara Gordon in a wheelchair? What put her in the wheelchair? When did she get out of the wheelchair? Is she sort of like the Professor X of the DC universe? She's in the wheelchair, she's out of the wheelchair, she's back in the wheelchair, or was she only in the wheelchair for a certain amount of time?
But they shot her in Killing Joke.
Which was supposed to be out of continuity, but it did so well they decided to make it continuity. So, like, 1988, she goes into the wheelchair. And then she came out during the New 52?
Yeah, kind of bullshit, too. It was like, we have a magic. Here, they couldn't have done it, like, any time before then. The same thing, but they're like, no, we got to do it now.
No, but I wasn't reading, like, the Chuck Dixon Birds of Prey stuff, so I have no real thoughts on that part of the run. Man, like the Ed Bennis covers of Birds of Prey when Gail Simone was writing, like that was like I saw those at Borders one day and I was just like, what is going on here? Who's that brunette chick? She looks kind of cool. I want to party with her. And that was like what got me to start reading that book. One of the most important characters in DC Comics, because like it was her going head to head against like the Calculator at the time, who was like Lex Luthor's right hand man going into Infinite Crisis, and like that shit I was just like, holy shit, like she is one of the coolest characters ever. So like I was kind of like pissed when they brought her out of the wheelchair. I'm like, but she was already so important.
How many people was that such a huge deal that you had a wheelchair bound superhero that was still able to carve out a role and be so active and so important?
Yeah.
The difference between Marvel and DC has always been that DC is great for like one-off stories, like 4, 5, 6 issue stories. They do a great job with those. They're Elseworlds, they're 12-issue Tom King stories. They're great. But Marvel has always been the one for the long boxes, where, you know, it's the soap opera that goes on. And like, you asked me to pick out really great Spider-Man stories from the last 30 years. There's a couple, but it's more about the ongoing epic. Mm-hmm. And DC screws that up so hard because they had all these legacy characters, and like whether it was your Wally Wests or whether it was your Barbara Gordons or whether it was, you know, people like Tim Drake or Cassie Cain or Stephanie, who was a Robin, like they all get pushed aside because like, no, let's bring the old dead ones back. Like, what? How do you bring Hal Jordan back from being parallaxed?
Yeah.
Good,
and I'm sure that there are some people that pissed off, like when they're like, oh, why'd you screw with my favorite character and do this with them, right? But after it's done, and then you
Jason Todd.
You build all this universe around it, I'm sorry, just keep building from there. Don't go back. Don't go backwards. Yeah. It already happened. Let's move on.
This is bad. They look at Krakoa. They're all dead and resurrected, and now someone has a cold, but like it's all.
But it was a good recommendation, though, Chad. I like that particular run with Tim Drake, and that's really sad what they did with him, unfortunately. But one thing that's not sad is the last comic shop and your ability to find it every single week. It's not sad at all. You should be overjoyed because you get to hear us talk about comic books every single week and give you these awesome recommendations. And not only that, but you can check out all of our past episodes filled with all these other comic books that you can check out at your leisure. Go out to www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com, rate, review, and subscribe, and you'll never miss any of these awesome comic book recommendations or reviews, whether they be past, present, or future, because we're not going anywhere.
Right. While we may be the Last Comic Shop podcast, we don't want to be the Last Comic Shop. And boy, do we have recommendations for you this week. So we have Cassie Cain Batgirl, which we read issues 1 through 11. And then we were recommended more Cassie Cain Batgirl through issue 37 with the original creative team. And then even more Cassie Cain Batgirl up through issue 73 just to finish out the run because she's an interesting character. Then we talked about Birds of Prey, where she's popping up these days. We talked about Chase. We talked about Global Frequency. We talked about Harrow County, which has nothing to do with Batgirl. Then we talked about Magic. And then we went back to the Bat Universe for The Lonely Place of Dying. All of that and more potentially could be found at your local comic shop. Seek them out today, and then seek us out on the internets, on all the social media platforms, well, primarily Blue Sky. And then you can circle back to the website, www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com. Jay, tell them about our merch.
We've got loads of it. It's the winter time. Stay warm. Get yourself a hoodie or a hat. Maybe even we'll get some cabbie hats.
Oliver Twisty, yeah.
You think we could do some Last Comic Shop cabbie hats this week only?
May I have another hat?
Well, one thing that we hope that you always have emotion with is saving money on your comic book supplies. Chad, what do they have to do in order to save some money on comic book supplies?
Go to bcwsupplies.com. Find everything you need for your comic collecting adventure, including bags, boards, fancy placards, and whatever. And they include stuff for card collectors as well. And when you enter the code LCSPOD, you get 10% off of your order. That's right, 10% off of your order. And we get a little piece of that action too at no cost to you. So bcwsupplies.com, promo code LCSPOD for 10% off your bags, boards, comic, and card collecting supplies.
Yeah, stick all of those awesome recommendations, tons of them this week. And one other recommendation we always have is check out Shortbox Summary. George, where can they find your show every single week?
Literally any place where podcasts are sold. That is a bad joke because my show is free. So iTunes, Spotify, TuneCaster, anywhere you listen to podcasts, we are there. I also promise going to be a new episode this year, guys. Get excited.
Yes, we've been waiting.
So the show is coming back. It is imminent, I promise. And also, I'm going to rope you in. I'm also going to rope Mikey in because I don't feel like he does a lot when he's not on the show, right? He doesn't have a lot going on. He's just sitting there. Yeah, he's just sitting there thinking about a Swamp Thing. I'm like, hey, guy, what if you thought about Doctor Strange, the Oath from the year 2006 instead of Swamp Thing?
Did you just say he's sitting there thinking about his Swamp Thing?
Not his Swamp Thing, just Swamp Thing in general.
All right. Well, in any case, make sure that you're coming back in a couple weeks because Mikey would be on the episode. But next week, we've got Bone with Ethan Larson, so stay tuned for that. Until then, I'm the host with the most, Andy Larson. I'm joined by Chad Smith, Jay Scott, and the wonderful George from Shortbox Summary. Until next week, when we'll give you that bone, we hope that you stay safe, stay springy, because it's almost springtime. Yeah, winter's rolling down here, folks.
And always remember, the way a barber wins a race is because he knows a shortcut.
See, I didn't have to do it this week. Oh, that's why I love having you around, George. You're the best.
Comic Shop Podcast was a 2025 Black Angus production.